Commander Marcus Cole stood at the window of the transport ship and watched the alien world grow larger with each passing second, his hands gripping the metal railing so tight that his knuckles had turned white, and his heart was beating like a drum inside his chest as he realized there was no turning back. Now he never wanted this mission, never asked to be the one standing here with the fate of humanity resting on his shoulders like a weight he could barely carry. But the Earth Council had given him no choice when they called him into that cold meeting room 3 weeks ago and told him he was going to Velthera. "Prime, you survived 3 colonial sieges," the council chairman had said with a voice as flat as paper. "You know how to stay calm under pressure, and that is exactly what we need right now." Marcus wanted to laugh at those words because staying calm was the last thing he felt capable of doing. When he thought about the Veltheri Dominion and what they had done to other species across the galaxy, how they had crushed civilization after civilization with a cold efficiency that made them the most feared empire in known space. 12 species had fallen to the Veltheri in the last 1,000 years, and not a single one had managed to resist them for more than a decade. Their worlds, now nothing but resource mines, and their people reduced to servants who had forgotten they ever had their own cultures and dreams. And now the Veltheri had turned their eyes toward Earth. The war had started 8 months ago when a Veltheri fleet appeared at the edge of human space and demanded immediate surrender. But humanity had done something that shocked the entire galaxy and sent ripples of disbelief through every alien council chamber. They had said no. Marcus remembered the battles that followed, the desperate fights in the darkness between stars where human ships held the line against enemies with technology far beyond their own. And somehow, against all logic and reason, they had not lost. They had not crumbled. They had fought the Veltheri to a standstill that nobody thought possible, but they could not win either, and everyone knew it. Which is why, when Queen Seraphis herself sent a message requesting a human envoy to discuss peace, the council had jumped at the chance, even though they knew it might be a trap. The transport ship shuddered as it entered the atmosphere of Velthera Prime, and Marcus forced himself to breathe slowly as clouds of purple and gold swept past the windows, revealing glimpses of a world that looked like something from a fevered dream. Towers of bioluminescent crystal rose from the surface, like frozen flames, their light shifting through colors that human eyes struggled to process. And between them lay gardens of plants that seemed to move on their own, as if they were aware of the ship passing overhead. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time, and Marcus understood in that moment why so many species had surrendered to the Veltheri without much of a fight. Because how could anyone look at this level of advancement and think they stood a chance? The ship landed on a platform of smooth black stone, and Marcus took one last breath before the door opened and he stepped out into air that smelled like flowers and electricity, his boots echoing against the ground as a group of Veltheri approached to greet him. They were tall, nearly 7 feet each, with skin that shimmered like oil on water and eyes that held no pupils, just swirling depths of silver and gold that seemed to look right through him and see every secret he had ever kept. "Human," the lead Veltheri said in a voice that sounded like wind chimes. "The Queen awaits you. Follow and do not speak unless spoken to. That is our way." Marcus nodded and fell into step behind them as they led him through corridors of living light, past walls that pulsed with soft colors and floors that felt warm beneath his feet. And everywhere he looked, there were more Veltheri watching him with those strange, beautiful eyes. He felt like an insect walking through a palace built for gods, and he wondered if that was exactly how they wanted him to feel. Small and insignificant, and ready to beg for whatever scraps of mercy they might offer. But Marcus had not survived 3 sieges by giving in to fear, and he forced his spine straight and his chin up as they entered the throne room. A vast chamber filled with floating platforms and streams of light that flowed through the air like rivers made of stars. And there at the center of it all sat Queen Serafishi was ancient. That much was clear from the weight of presence that surrounded her like a physical force. But her face was smooth and perfect, and her eyes held depths that seemed to stretch back through millennia of memory and experience. "So, this is what a human looks like," she said, and her voice filled the chamber without effort, wrapping around Marcus like silk. "I expected something more impressive, given how much trouble your species has caused us." Marcus knew he should stay silent, but something in her tone sparked a fire in his chest, and before he could stop himself, the words came out. "With respect, Your Majesty, we did not start this war. We only refused to end it on our knees." The room went completely still, and Marcus could feel the shock radiating from every Veltari, present as if he had just committed some unforgivable sin. But Queen Seraphis did not look angry. Instead, something flickered across her face. That might have been surprise or perhaps even amusement. "You speak boldly for someone standing alone in the heart of enemy territory," she said while leaning forward on her throne. "Do you not fear what I could do to you with a single word?" "I am terrified," Marcus admitted, because there was no point in lying to someone who had probably seen 1,000 liars in her time. But fear has never stopped humans from speaking the truth. The Queen studied him for a long moment, and the silence stretched until Marcus could hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. And then she did something that made every advisor in the room gasp with disbelief. She smiled. "Your diplomatic protocols bore me, and your prepared speeches will be useless here," she said while rising from her throne with a grace that made her seem to float. "I have decided that I wish to know you better, human, which is why you will stay the night with me in my private chambers." Marcus felt his heart stop, and then start again twice as fast as the meaning of her words sank in. And all he could think was that no alien had ever entered the Queen's chambers and returned unchanged. Some had not returned at all. "Do you accept?" she asked, though it was clearly not a question. Marcus swallowed hard and nodded, because what choice did he have? "Good," Queen Seraphis said with that strange smile still playing on her lips. "This should be very interesting indeed." And as the guards led him away toward whatever fate awaited him, Marcus could only think of one thing. His heart was pounding so hard, he was sure the whole palace could hear it. The guards led Marcus through corridors that seemed to go on forever, each one more beautiful and strange than the last, until they stopped before a door made of what looked like solid light and stepped aside without a word. "Enter," came the Queen's voice from within, and Marcus pushed through the glowing barrier to find himself in a chamber that took his breath away. The room was vast but somehow felt intimate, with walls that shifted between transparent and opaque to reveal glimpses of the night sky beyond, and furniture that seemed grown rather than built. All curves and flowing shapes that hurt his eyes if he looked too closely. Queen Seraphis stood by a window with her back to him, her silhouette framed against the glow of the city below. And when she turned to face him, there was something different about her expression, something almost vulnerable that he had not seen in the throne room. "You may relax, human," she said, while gesturing to a seat that rose from the floor at her command. "There are no witnesses here, no court watching our every move. Just you and I and the truth between us." Marcus sat down slowly, his body tense and ready for whatever trap might spring. But the Queen only laughed softly at his caution as she moved to stand before him. "You think I brought you here to harm you," she said, and it was not a question. "Perhaps to torture you for military secrets, or to break your spirit so you would return to your people a broken messenger of our power." The thought crossed my mind, Marcus admitted. Of course it did. That is what any sensible being would expect from the Veltari, she replied while beginning to circle him slowly like a predator examining prey. We have built our reputation on fear, and for 10,000 years it has served us well. But fear is a tool that grows dull with time, and I find myself in need of something sharper. She stopped in front of him and knelt down so their eyes were level. A gesture so unexpected that Marcus forgot to breathe for a moment. Tell me about your world, human. Tell me about Earth and your people, and why you fight so hard for planets you have only lived on for a few generations. It was not the question Marcus had prepared for, and he found himself struggling to find the right words as those ancient eyes watched him with an intensity that felt like it could peel back his skin and see straight into his soul. We fight because we have to, he said finally. Because every world we settle becomes home to someone, becomes the place where children are born and families grow and memories are made. And giving that up would mean giving up a part of ourselves. But your species has no telepathic bond, the Queen said with what sounded like genuine confusion. You cannot feel what others feel or share their thoughts. Each of you exists alone inside your own skull with no direct connection to any other. How can you care so deeply about people you cannot truly know? Marcus thought about his sister back on Earth, about the friends he had lost in the sieges, about every human who had ever reached out across the void of individual existence to touch another soul. That loneliness is exactly why we care, he said. Because we know how it feels to be alone, and we spend our whole lives trying to build bridges across that gap. Through words and touch and shared experience. And every connection we make is a victory against the darkness. Something shifted in the Queen's expression, and she rose to her feet and walked to the window again. A reflection ghostly in the transparent surface. My people do not understand loneliness, she said quietly. From the moment a Velthari is born, they are connected to the collective consciousness of our species. With me at the center feeling everything they feel, carrying their joys and sorrows and fears as my own. She turned to face him, and for the first time, Marcus saw something like pain in those silver eyes. I have never been alone in my own mind. Human, not for a single moment in 10,000 years. And there are times when the weight of 1 billion thoughts pressing against my consciousness makes me want to scream. Marcus did not know what to say, so he said nothing and simply waited. And the Queen seemed to appreciate his silence because she continued speaking with a voice that had grown soft and tired. We watched your species with great interest when you first appeared on the galactic stage. So young and fragile and divided amongst yourselves, fighting your own kind as often as you fought others. And we thought you would tear yourselves apart long before you ever became a threat. She moved closer to him and sat down on another piece of furniture that had not been there a moment ago. But you did not fall apart. You grew stronger with each conflict, learning and adapting and changing in ways that should have been impossible. And when our fleets arrived, expecting easy conquest, we found something we had never encountered before. What was that? Marcus asked. Hope, the Queen replied. Your soldiers were terrified and outmatched, and they knew they were probably going to die. But they fought anyway with a ferocity that my commanders could not explain. Not for glory or duty, but for something deeper. Something my people have never truly understood. We fight for each other, Marcus said simply. For the people behind us who are counting on us. For the future we might never see, but desperately want to exist. The Queen was silent for a long moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. My people are dying. Human, not from war or disease, but from stagnation. The same telepathic bond that makes us powerful also makes us unchanging. No new ideas can flourish when every thought is shared and judged by billions. No individual can grow when they are never truly separate from the whole. She looked at him with those ancient eyes, and Marcus saw something he never expected to see in the ruler of the most feared empire in the galaxy. Desperation. We have conquered 12 species and absorbed their knowledge and technology. But none of it has helped because the problem is not what we know but what we are. And I have watched my people slowly lose the ability to dream and create and wonder. Why are you telling me this? Marcus asked, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and something else he could not name. Because your species does what we cannot, she replied. You change, you grow, you argue and fight amongst yourselves, and from that chaos comes progress. And I need to understand how that is possible. She reached out and took his hand, her touch cool and electric against his skin. Will you teach me, human? Will you show me what it means to be truly alone and truly free? Marcus looked into the eyes of the being who had terrified half the galaxy and saw not a monster but a person. Ancient and powerful and desperately lonely in a way. Her own people could never understand and against every instinct that told him to be careful. He squeezed her hand and nodded. I will try. The night deepened around them as Marcus and the Queen talked, hour after hour passing like minutes. And somewhere along the way, the distance between them had shrunk until they sat side by side on a balcony overlooking the glowing city below. Tell me about fear, Sci-Fi said while staring out at her empire. My people feel it collectively, a shared tremor that passes through the bond like a wave. But you experience it alone inside your own body. How do you survive it? Marcus thought about all the times he had been afraid. The battles where death seemed certain, the long nights waiting for attacks that might never come. The moment he had stepped onto this alien world, knowing he might never see Earth again. We do not really survive it, he admitted. Fear never goes away. It just becomes something we carry with us. Like a weight in our chest that we learn to move with instead of against. That sounds exhausting, the Queen said. It is, Marcus replied with a small laugh. But it also makes the moments without fear feel like gifts. Like suddenly being able to breathe after holding your breath for too long. Seraphis turned to look at him with an expression of wonder that made her seem much younger than her 10,000 years. You find value in suffering, she said slowly as if tasting the concept. For the first time, not in the suffering itself, but in what comes after, Marcus explained. The relief, the gratitude, the knowledge that you made it through something hard and came out the other side. Those feelings only exist because the bad times exist too. The Queen was silent for a long moment, and when she spoke again, her voice had a strange quality to it. Almost like she was confessing a crime. I have never allowed myself to feel negative emotions fully, she said. When sadness or fear or anger rises in me, I push it into the collective bond and let it disperse among billions of minds until it becomes nothing more than a faint echo. I thought this was strength, but now I wonder if it has made me hollow. What do you mean? Marcus asked. I cannot remember the last time I truly cried, Seraphis said, with something like horror in her voice. I cannot remember the last time I felt joy that was only mine and not diluted by the feelings of my entire species. I have lived for so long by spreading myself thin that I am not sure there is anything solid left at my center. She looked at her hands as if seeing them for the first time. How do you humans stay whole when you feel everything so intensely? It was a question Marcus had never considered before, and he found himself reaching for an answer he was not sure he had. We break sometimes, he said honestly. We fall apart and make mistakes and hurt the people we love. But then we put ourselves back together and try again. And every time we rebuild, we learn something new about who we are. You make failure sound almost beautiful, the Queen said. It can be, Marcus replied. Some of the best humans I have ever known were people who had failed spectacularly and used that failure to become something better. We have a saying on Earth that you cannot have a rainbow without rain. Seraphis smiled at that. A real smile that reached her eyes and transformed her face into something almost warm. Your language is full of such poetry. We Valkyries speak in precise terms with exact meanings. There is no room for metaphor when your thoughts are shared directly. That must make lying impossible. Marcus said. It does, the Queen confirmed. Which is why your species fascinated us so much. You can deceive each other with words and faces and false emotions. And yet, you also create things like art and music and stories that speak truths deeper than facts could ever reach. She gestured toward the city below where lights danced in patterns that seemed almost random. We have architecture and technology and knowledge, accumulated over millennia. But we have not created anything truly new in longer than I care to admit. Our art is repetition of ancient forms and our music is mathematical precision without soul. What happened? Marcus asked. Sensing that this was the heart of what she wanted to tell him. The bond happened. Seraphis replied with a bitterness that surprised him. When every idea is shared instantly and judged by billions. When every creative impulse is smoothed out by consensus before it can fully form. When there is no privacy in which strange and wonderful thoughts can grow undisturbed. Innovation dies. She stood and walked to the edge of the balcony, her silhouette a dark shape against the glow of the city. The 12 species we conquered. We did not just take their worlds and resources. We absorbed them into the bond, thinking their different perspectives would refresh our stagnant culture. But instead, the bond consumed their uniqueness and made them just more voices in the endless chorus. Is that what you planned for humanity? Marcus asked. Quiet Lysistrata turned to face him, and there were tears in her silver eyes. Actual tears that caught the light like diamonds as they fell. Yes, she whispered. I am so sorry. Yes, we were going to do to your people what we did to all the others. Add your voices to our bond, and in doing so destroy everything that makes you special. Marcus felt his heart clench at her words, but also at the raw pain in her voice. This was not a conqueror gloating over plans of domination. This was someone horrified by what they had become. What changed? He asked. You did, she said, while moving closer to him until they were standing face to face. Watching your soldiers fight with such passion and your diplomats argue with such fire. Seeing how you refused to give up, even when logic said you should. I realized that your chaos is not a weakness to be cured, but a strength we desperately need. She reached up and touched his face with fingers that trembled slightly. And tonight, talking to you, being with just one mind instead of billions, I have felt more alive than I have in centuries. Marcus covered her hand with his own and looked into those ancient alien eyes. What do you want to do about it? The Queen took a deep breath, and when she spoke her voice was steady with new determination. I want to save my people by learning from yours. I want to find a way to give them what you have. The ability to be alone and afraid and gloriously imperfect. She smiled through her tears. Will you help me? Marcus Cole of Earth. And Marcus, whose heart had not stopped pounding since he first set foot on this world, found himself smiling back. I thought you would never ask. Dawn came slowly on Velthera Prime, the purple sky gradually giving way to shades of gold and rose that painted the crystal towers in colors Marcus had no words for. And he found himself standing beside Queen Seraphis as they watched the sun rise over an empire that was about to change forever. My advisors will think I've gone mad, Seraphis said with a small laugh that held both amusement and nervousness. 10,000 years of tradition and conquest, and I am about to throw it all away because of one night talking with a human. Are you having second thoughts? Marcus asked. No, she replied firmly. For the first time in longer than I can remember, I am having first thoughts, original thoughts. Ideas that belong only to me and have not been filtered through the opinions of billions. She turned to face him, and there was a fire in his silver eyes that had not been there before. I spent the night learning what it feels like to be an individual, to have a conversation that was truly private, to form opinions without instantly knowing how everyone else would react to them. And I understand now why your species fights so hard to preserve that freedom. So what happens now? Marcus asked. Now I make you an offer that will either save both our peoples or destroy everything I have built. Sci-Fi said while taking a deep breath, and I need you to take it back to your council and convince them it is genuine. She walked to a table that had materialized from the floor and activated a display showing maps of the galaxy with human and Velthari territories marked in different colors. I propose an alliance. Not the kind where one side serves the other, but a true partnership between equals. Your people will have access to our technology and resources, and in return, you will teach us how to think for ourselves again. Marcus stared at the display with his mind racing to understand what he was seeing. You want us to teach you how to be individuals? Yes. Sci-Fi confirmed. We will establish exchange programs where Velthari come to live among humans and experience what it means to be separate from the bond. We will study your art and music and literature to understand how beauty can emerge from chaos. And we will learn from your mistakes as much as your successes. This will not be easy, Marcus warned. Humans are not gentle teachers, and our history is full of violence and cruelty alongside the good things. I know, the Queen replied. I have studied your wars and your genocides and your capacity for terrible destruction. But I have also seen how you rise from your worst moments and build something better. That resilience is exactly what my people need to learn. She reached out and took his hand the way she had the night before. That gesture that felt more intimate than anything physical could be. There will be those among my people who resist this change. Some of them violently. The bond has made us dependent on each other in ways that feel like love but might actually be addiction. Breaking free of it will cause pain and confusion and fear. There will be those among my people who will not trust this offer, Marcus replied honestly. After what the Velthari have done to other species, many humans will believe this is just another trick to conquer us. Then we will have to prove them wrong, Sci-Fi said. Together, the word hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning and possibility. Why me? Marcus asked suddenly. The question that had been burning in his mind since this all began. Of all the humans you could have chosen to speak with, why did you pick a soldier instead of a diplomat or a scientist? Sci-Fi smiled with that strange warmth that made her seem almost human, because diplomats are trained to lie beautifully and scientists observe without truly connecting. But soldiers know the cost of war in ways that cannot be hidden behind words. When you walked into my throne room, I could see every battle you had survived, written in the lines of your face and the way you carried yourself. She lifted her hand to touch the scar on his cheek, a souvenir from the second siege that he had carried for years. You knew what it meant to fight for something bigger than yourself. And you were afraid, but you came anyway. That courage born from fear is something my people have never understood. And I needed someone who could show me what it meant. Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion he could not name. I am just a soldier. I am not qualified to shape the future of two species. Neither am I, Sci-Fi replied with a laugh. I have ruled for 10,000 years, and I still do not know what I am doing most of the time. The difference is that humans admit their uncertainty, while we Velthari pretend we have all the answers. She looked out at the city that was now fully bathed in morning light. Perhaps that is the first lesson you can teach us. How to say I do not know without feeling like we have failed. Marcus thought about everything that had happened since he arrived on this world. The fear and confusion and unexpected connection that had formed between him and this ancient alien queen. And he realized that the most human thing he could do right now was exactly what she suggested. I do not know if this will work, he said. I do not know if our peoples can learn to trust each other, or if this alliance will survive the challenges ahead. But I believe it is worth trying, and I will do everything I can to make your council understand why. Sci-Fi squeezed his hand, and when she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. That is all I ask. Marcus, that you try, that you bring this offer back to your people and fight for it the way you have fought for everything else. Not because victory is guaranteed, but because the possibility of something better is worth the risk. I will need proof to show them, Marcus said. Something more than just my word that the Queen of the Velthury wants peace. You will have it, she promised. I will send you back with technology that will advance your species by centuries. Not weapons, but medical knowledge and energy systems and agricultural methods that will end hunger and disease on your worlds. That is incredibly generous, Marcus said with surprise. It is incredibly necessary, Seraphis corrected him. How can I ask your people to trust us if we do not first show that we are willing to give without demanding anything in return? She turned to face him fully, and there was a new light in her eyes. The light of someone who had rediscovered hope after thinking it lost forever. Besides, what good is all our technology if we use it only to conquer and control? Perhaps it is time the Velthury learned to give instead of take. Marcus looked at this being who had terrified half the galaxy and saw only a person trying to do something brave and uncertain and good, and his heart, which had been pounding with fear when this all began, was now pounding with something entirely different. 6 months had passed since Marcus Cole returned to Earth with an offer that changed everything, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The news had spread like wildfire through every corner of known space. The Velthury Dominion, the most feared empire in galactic history, had extended a hand of friendship to the youngest species anyone had ever seen, and the universe watched with a mixture of disbelief and fascination. As the impossible alliance began to take shape, Marcus stood in the Great Hall of the United Earth Council as representatives from a dozen human worlds gathered to hear the latest reports. His uniform decorated with medals he had never asked for, and his face broadcast on screens across the entire solar system. The exchange program is exceeding all expectations, he told the assembly. 300 Velthury have now completed their first rotation among human communities, and the changes in them are remarkable. He activated a holographic display showing footage of Velthury individuals living among humans, working alongside them in farms and factories and schools, their silver eyes wide with wonder as they experienced things they had never imagined possible. For the first time in their lives, these Velthury are learning what it means to have private thoughts, Marcus continued. They are discovering that disagreement does not mean betrayal, and that being alone is not the same as being abandoned. A council member raised her hand with a skeptical expression. And what about the ones who have not adapted? We have heard reports of Velthury becoming overwhelmed by the separation from their collective bond. Marcus nodded gravely because this was true, and he would not pretend otherwise. Some have struggled greatly, and a few have asked to return to Velthura Prime. But even these individuals carry back with them seeds of change. They have glimpsed another way of being, and that knowledge cannot be erased. He thought of Queen Seraphis and the messages they had exchanged over these months. Updates on the progress of her people, and questions about human culture that showed how deeply she was trying to understand. She had told him about the resistance within her own government, the advisors who whispered that she had been corrupted by the human and should be removed before she destroyed everything they had built. And he had worried for her safety until she assured him that she was handling it in her own way. Change is never easy, she had written in her last message. But every Velthury who returns from your worlds with new ideas in their head is a crack in the wall we built around ourselves. And eventually, those cracks will bring the whole thing down. The council session ended with a vote to expand the exchange program, and Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders that he had been carrying since this all began. Humanity was actually doing this, actually partnering with an empire that had once been their greatest enemy. And somehow it was working afterward. He walked through the corridors of the council building and found a quiet balcony where he could look up at the stars. Those distant points of light, that had seemed so threatening just a year ago, now held the promise of something incredible. Soft chime from his communicator announced an incoming transmission, and Marcus smiled when he saw who it was from. "Hello, Marcus," Queen Seraphis said as her holographic image appeared before him, her silver eyes warm in a way that still surprised him every time. "I hope I am not interrupting anything important." "Never," he replied honestly. "How are things on Velthera Prime?" "Chaotic in the best possible way," she said with a laugh that sounded almost human. "Yesterday, a young artist presented a painting to the court that was unlike anything we have created in millennia. It was imperfect and strange, and the colors clashed in ways that should have been ugly. But everyone who looked at it felt something they could not explain." She paused, and her expression grew thoughtful. "I think it was the first piece of truly original Veltheri art in 10,000 years. And it happened because the artist spent 6 months on Earth, learning that beauty does not require perfection." Marcus felt his heart swell with something like pride. Not for himself, but for both their peoples and what they were building together. "That is wonderful news. There is more," Seraphis continued. "The Council of 12 has voted to begin the process of weakening the telepathic bond. Not destroying it entirely, but creating spaces where individual Veltheri can exist apart from the collective, when they choose." This was huge news, and Marcus could barely believe what he was hearing. That must have been a difficult decision. "It was," the Queen admitted. "Many of my people are terrified of what they might become without the constant comfort of the bond. But they are more terrified of what we will become if we continue as we are. And fear of stagnation has finally overcome fear of change." She smiled, and there was a vulnerability in her expression that she showed only to him. "I wanted to thank you, Marcus. None of this would be happening without you." "I did not do anything special," he protested. "I just talked to you." "That is exactly what was special," Seraphis replied. "You talked to me like I was a person instead of a symbol. You were honest with me when honesty was dangerous. And you showed me that strength can exist alongside uncertainty." She reached toward the holographic interface, and for a moment, it almost seemed like she was reaching for him. "Your people have a phrase I have grown fond of. They say that humanity is greater than the sum of its parts. And I think I finally understand what that means." "What does it mean to you?" Marcus asked. "It means that your flaws and contradictions and beautiful chaos create something that perfect beings could never achieve," she said. "It means that your loneliness drives you to connection, and your fear drives you to courage, and your mortality drives you to make every moment matter." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. "It means that of all the species we have encountered across 10,000 years, yours is the only one that could have saved us from ourselves." Marcus thought about all the battles he had fought, and all the friends he had lost, and all the times he had wondered if humanity would survive the challenges of an uncaring universe. And he realized that none of those struggles had been in vain. "We are not saviors," he said quietly. "We are just stubborn enough to keep trying, even when it seems hopeless. That stubbornness is exactly what makes you extraordinary." Seraphis replied. They stood in silence for a moment, separated by light years of space, but connected by something that transcended distance. And Marcus knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. "Marcus," the Queen said finally, "when the alliance is strong enough, and my people no longer need my constant attention, I would very much like to visit Earth." "I would like that too," he said with a smile. "Perhaps you could show me what rain looks like," she continued, her voice carrying a warmth that made his heart pound the way it had that first night in her chambers. "I have seen 1,000 wonders across the galaxy, but I have never watched water fall from the sky." Marcus laughed and looked up at the stars that no longer seemed so cold and distant. "No, just the place," he said, "and somewhere across the vast darkness of space, An ancient queen who had ruled for 10,000 years smiled at a human soldier who had taught her how to hope. And the galaxy began to turn towards something new, something that neither species could have achieved alone, something beautifully, stubbornly, wonderfully human.